Welcome, everybody. We'll start the recording from here. So this is a sort of a fresh start. My name is Rabbi Phil Bressler. I'm the rabbi at Beit Am in Corvallis. And welcome to our session, The Whole Torah in One Tweet. We are looking at the significance of the text you see on the screen in front of you, a very famous story about two very famous rabbis from the tractate Shabbat in the Talmud. And like I said, a very famous story, but often and interpreted in a lot of different ways. But there's actually a lot going on here. One thing I want to say before we jump in is that if you've never read what they call Agadah, the stories in the Talmud, one feature you should know is that basically every word is significant. The rabbis who wrote the stories that are in the Talmud tried to use just a maximum economy of language. They tried to basically say as much as they can with as few words as possible. And so what that means is every word is chosen deliberately. And there's basically there's something to unpack from every element of this. There's nothing wasted. There's nothing superfluous. So you can do a pretty deep dive on this. This is, 3-4 lines in Hebrew and English and really come up with a lot. So can I get a volunteer to read it out loud? I often find, even though we're all staring at the screen together, an out loud reading sort of help us focus and come together around the text. Is there someone brave enough who wants to read out loud to the whole virtual room? Kaylee, you got it. Go ahead.
Once a Gentile came before Shammai. He said to him, I will convert to Judaism on the condition that you teach me the entire Torah while I stand on one leg, regel.
Mm-hmm. Good. That's the
Shammai pushed him away with the builder's measuring stick that was in his hand. He came before Hillel with the same condition. Hillel converted him. He said to him, that which is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. That is the entire Torah. The rest is its commentary. Go and learn it.
Thank you. So let's throw it open to the room, and you're going to need to take yourself off of mute to share your thoughts here on the most superficial level. What is this story about? Like, what's it for? What's the moral of the story here? What do you think on a superficial level?
Being humane.
Sorry, Gene, say that again.
Being humane.
Being humane. I see. So the treating the sort of golden rule, right?
Treat others how you would like to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean just people, though. Humanity, to be humane, like towards animals, towards plants, towards.
Okay. Susan or Mike? It's just Susan there, right? Yeah, Susan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that this is what I've heard is it's a kind of a twist on what's considered the golden rule, because it's in reverse. What's hateful to you, don't do to your fellow.
As opposed to
do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Right. It's a positive. It's a negative framing of the golden rule as opposed to that positive one. Yeah.
Historically, I would say that the inversion came in the opposite order.
That's probably true. And we'll think about why that might be the case a little later in the shiur. Good, but I think we nailed it. Here.
Well, I wanted to say I think it's an organizing principle for a society to operate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Like almost a golden rule, as it were, for a society to operate under. Absolutely. So on a superficial level, this story functions as basically just a delivery vehicle for that punchline, right? That's what hateful don't do to your fellow. That golden rule. It's everything else is sort of a setup to that.
Mm-hmm.
But I gotta ask you, who on earth would really come and make such a weird request with such a weird stipulation and with such weird stakes? Like, I want you to imagine, for example, that this is probably to some extent made up to teach us a lesson. I think we can assume, and I think for the purposes of our discussion, we should treat this not as the historical record of an incident that actually happened, but a story that's didactic, that's meant to teach us something, that's meant to teach us a lesson. And at least on a superficial level, that lesson, what's hateful to you, don't do to your fellow. Okay.
Sounds like someone wants to convert to whatever the simplest religion they can find is.
Maybe. So getting into that, the kind of, taking a step back and considering the characters involved, right? We got two rabbis, Hillel and Shammai, and also a non-Jew, a potential convert. Makes us want to kind of consider on a practical level, what's this story about? What's it for? And I think on a practical level, the story raises a practical question, which is about how do rabbis, how should Jews treat potential converts, especially ones like this gentleman here who seems to have maybe less than optimal conviction, as Kaylee put it, looking for the easiest religion, maybe the one that's, the one that can be understood while standing on one foot. Like this is not exactly, he's not making a convincing case to these rabbis, right? So this Gentile approaches the rabbis with I would say an inappropriate, perhaps even rude or offensive stipulation. He says, "Teach me the Torah, the whole Torah, the entire Torah, while I stand on one foot." I assume that's supposed to mean a short amount of time. I don't know how long you're all able to stand on one foot. Maybe some of you are gymnasts. Could be pretty long, but I'm sure it's not indefinitely. It's certainly not all day. I think we're supposed to understand it's a brief amount of time. Moreover, he says specifically, and it's here in the Hebrew, Kol HaTorah Kula. It's not just teach me the Torah. It's Kol HaTorah Kula, all of the Torah, all of it. Like it's almost double emphasized here. I think it's pretty significant that he says all of the Torah, because I think we're meant to infer that this Gentile doesn't just mean the Torah in the sense, the limited sense that we might think of it, the 5 books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, but the Torah in the broad sense. So Torah, Mishnah, which is 63 tractates long. The Talmud, there are almost 2.5 million words in the Talmud. Midrash, liturgy, all the customs and theology that go into Judaism, like literally all of the Torah. Teach me all of Judaism, I think is what we're meant to understand him asking here, while I stand here on one foot. And Shammai treats him as a troublemaker, to use some Twitter terminology here, a troll, right? This guy's a troll. And our questioner displays what's at best a pretty shocking lack of seriousness, I would say, right? It's as if to say, I think, as Kaylee put it, I'm not willing to put in the time, I'm not willing to put in the effort to study and observe and train as I would to master any sort of serious, important skill. I just want the reward without the hard work. I just want to know. I just want to know the bottom line, but I don't want to put any of that effort in, right? Yeah. And Shammai, for his part, is having none of it. As they say on Twitter, don't feed the trolls. And he fends him off with the measuring stick that was in his hand. And you should know this is actually a really great bit of characterization here. So Shammai, his trade when he wasn't, his day job basically was as a builder. Oh. So he fends the guy off with the measuring stick that he uses, that he had with him, almost as if he carries it around all the time just for such a purpose. But it makes sense in character for Shammai to have a stick with him, because he would have used it as part of his job on a day in and day out basis here. But Shammai's the negative role model here, right? The way story's set up, who's the rabbi we're supposed to emulate? It's Hillel, right? Yeah. Hillel's the one who gives this guy the benefit of the doubt, right? Maybe he's naive, or maybe he's ignorant, or just unaware of the depth of Jewish religious tradition and way of life, right? Hillel, by the time the story would have been composed, was already set up as kind of the hero, the role model of all sorts of various virtuous Jewish character traits: patience, humility, gentleness, understanding. So on a level just below that sort of superficial level of this is a delivery vehicle for the golden rule, we have this question about how do we treat potential converts, and we learn something from it, which is basically be like Hillel, right? Be patient and humble and gracious. And I like to think, for my part, that's the attitude that the rabbis take these days, or should take, with regard to potential converts. Any thoughts about that? Comments about that sort of level of it as treatment of converts? I've seen some people take themselves off of mute already. Liz, what do you think? Oh, maybe not. Liz went back on mute. Let's see. Who else wants to share?
What came to mind to me was, and I am a convert, working on that, was it seemed like it tied into the thing where converts are supposed to be turned away first before they're accepted, and at least according to some. And so the convert was turned away at first and then was tried again and was accepted.
Yeah, that's a longer conversation about attitudes toward converts in general. That bit about the rejecting 3 times is not written anywhere. It's not actually mandatory or really enforced. That's sort of one of those kind of urban legends, with probably a grain of truth to it. For my part, it's not part of my practice in terms of taking on conversion students, but I think this is illustrating that same kind of the sort of navigating the degree of suspicion or the degree of sort of open embracing that a rabbi ought to properly have with regard to potential converts. I just want to pause for a second because a lot of folks just joined the channel. Welcome everyone. Yeah, we have a lot of folks who just popped in. It's okay. We're still on the first page of the source sheet. You're just in time. And we'll stay here for a little while longer. I should reiterate, my name is Rabbi Phil Bressler. I'm from Beit Am in Corvallis, and we're talking about this story here in the Talmud about Hillel and Shammai. Go ahead and read and get caught up. We talked already about how on one level this is a delivery vehicle for the golden rule that shows up at the end. What's hateful to you, don't do to your fellow. That's something we're supposed to learn is that rule and to follow it. And on another level, this is a story about how to treat potential converts. Not like Shammai, who pushes the Gentile away with his stick. We should be like Hillel. So, at first glance, Hillel's response is pretty straightforward, right? It's, what's hateful to you, don't do to your fellow. We think of that already as a kind of easily digestible idea because it's something already part of our I guess, kind of cultural vocabulary. The fact that we even have a name for it as the golden rule is pretty telling of that. And that's the entire Torah. The rest is commentary, go and learn. It sounds relatively straightforward. But I think upon further examination and reflection, this is actually a little bit more complex and challenging than you might think. So he offers this golden rule, which is actually not even particularly unique to Judaism, I would say. I think there are other religions that have basically similar ideas about how we ought to treat one another, other human beings. I'm not, I think, arrogant enough to claim that the Jews were the first ones to invent kindness towards others. I think if we sort of imagine this scene playing out in first century BC or CE, somewhere in that area, Israel. The Gentile would almost be like, yeah, so big deal. I already know that. Like that's something I already know. That's not a particularly shocking response from Hillel to say that which is hateful to you, don't do to your fellow. On the other hand, though, so on the one hand, that is the entire Torah. Hillel sort of distills it down to his essence, right? That's the entire Torah. But on the other hand, he doesn't stop there. On the other hand, there's the rest, as he calls it. It's commentary. It's perush, as the Hebrew says, which importantly says, zil gmor, go and learn it. And he says that has to be learned too. So Hillel's answer is, it's acceptable for the situation. It's short, it's easy to formulate, digest, but it also actually contains this implicit, almost quasi-stipulation of his own. So this Gentile, remember, he comes and says, do this, but I'm gonna make stipulations on it. You have to basically convince me in short order while I stand here. Hillel says, okay, I'll do that. Here's your answer. But actually, there's a stipulation what I'm telling you too, which is that this is basically the entire Torah, parentheses, for now. Later, you actually have to go and learn it. Later, and actually further on in the Talmud, we hear that this particular convert actually looks back on this incident and feels eternally grateful to Hillel for the gentleness that he says, brought me under the divine presence. Meanwhile, Shammai's impatience, he said, sought to drive me from the world. So it turns out it works. Hillel's approach of gentleness with this convert really, it works. It convinces him. But it also, his stipulation is important. It draws this would-be in, but indicates that it's not just, he sort of responds to the stipulation and fulfills it, but indicates that that's not the whole story and that it really wasn't a valid stipulation in the first place. Liz, I see your hand. Go ahead, please. Thanks for using that hand raise function. Oh, Liz? Are you there? Maybe it was an accidental hand. Or Hannah, you have your hand raised too? Go ahead.
Sure. I was just noticing.
Hang on, Liz. I see Liz's mouth moving, but I can't hear her. Yeah, we can't hear you, Liz.
Is your microphone plugged in or muted or something?
Hannah, you're good. But Liz, do me a favor. Check down in the bottom left where sort of by the mute button, there's a little down-looking arrow. Hover over that and go select microphone and make sure you have the right microphone selected. Sometimes that's a problem for me. Yeah, it's still not working. If you want to type a question in the chat box, I can answer you. I'm sorry. Hannah, in the meantime, why don't you go ahead? Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I love that a student, a convert, or any student would say, hey, do you have a cohesive point here to all of your writings and all of your stories before I invest in really all the time and energy to learn? Like, just like when I walk into an organization or business meeting, I want to know, is all this going to lead up to something? And what's this really about? And I love that there is an answer to that Hillel comes up with that does get someone to think, okay, this is all pointing to something. Now I'll go learn.
Interesting. I like that point that this is in some ways a really valuable exercise in kind of summing up what it's all about, because otherwise it'd be impossible to sort of get across the totality of it all to even indicate to this guy that this is something worthwhile. Is that kind of what I hear you saying, that like this is enough of a summary that it's valuable and worth pursuing?
Yeah, and that anyone sharing a whole wealth of knowledge is best off sort of having a cohesive, clear guiding principle behind it if you're going to engage people in it.
Yeah. Yeah, as Sarah says in the chat, this is the elevator speech. This is the elevator pitch for Judaism.
Yeah.
I think that's very possible. And Liz asks, how do we know who is a convert? Couldn't anyone be a convert? Yeah, as Kaylee says, generally just if we say so. Yes, it's a relatively complex process. Is not really actually the focus of the shiur tonight, but it usually involves some amount of study and then going before a Beit Din who basically give their approval and immersion in a mikvah, and that's basically the process. So yes, in theory, anyone could convert, and there's nothing on the face of it that disqualifies this particular Gentile, other than that he seems to be sort of, maybe acting in bad faith. It's hard to know. It's hard to know. Sarah says, that's what I was thinking as a potential convert myself. In a seriously meta moment, I found myself wondering if that's why I chose to come to session time with the whole Torah in one tweet. Maybe so. Well, I hope we can do something to advance that idea that this is maybe the right thing for you. Let's go on a little bit. So let's peel back another layer here. So we've looked at this so far as, like I keep saying, delivery vehicle for the Golden Rule. We've also looked at it as a story about how to treat a potential convert. But let's peel back one more layer and think about that. Think about what Hillel is doing here, and we've been sort of getting at this idea already, which is basically summing up the whole Torah, trying to, somehow distill it. So let me ask you this. So I think we can get to this if we think about why this story, which we already said at the top was, kind of set up as a fictional tale to try to teach us. Why do they set the story? Why is the story told with such an odd stipulation and such a paradoxical answer? Like, what if this non-Jew had come and said, you know, I'll convert to Judaism on the condition you teach me to keep Shabbat while I stand on one foot, or teach me to eat kosher, or something very complex that you actually really cannot fully explain on one foot, but a different thing instead of the whole Torah. Hillel could have said something like, you know, if say the Gentile comes and says, you know, teach me to keep Shabbat while I stand on one foot. Hillel could have said something like, do no manner of work and make the Sabbath a delight. That's all there is to know about Shabbat. The rest is commentary. Go and learn, right? And we would have learned a lot of those same kind of things. We would have learned the same lessons about gentleness and patience and things like that. But the Gentile asked a very specific question. I see those hands. I'll get to you in just one sec. The Gentile asked a very specific question, which is about Kol HaTorah Kula, the entire Torah, which I think suggests there's an alternative approach to considering what this story is really about. If we consider the question itself, independent of its narrative context, like forget that it's a Gentile asking Rabbis Shammai and Hillel. This story is about the question: is there an essence to Torah? What is that essence? What is Judaism's fundamental principle, right? And actually, this is something I got from, as I mentioned to a few people, this book, The Land of Truth by Dr. Jeffrey Rubinstein, who encourages readers and me to frame this personally. And basically, instead of asking, you know, in a sort of vague way, what's the essence of Torah? For me and for you, what is the minimum I have to do to consider myself pious, to consider myself Jewish, to be a good Jew? What is that essence that if I don't do it, I'm missing it, right? In other words, you know, if it's almost impossible to observe everything, what's the minimum? How much suffices? Okay, let's double back to answer some of those questions. Rachel, and then I think Carolina also had a question too. Rachel, go ahead first.
So I didn't have a question. I had a comment. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
And so, well, two things. One, and I raised my hand before we got on to the topic you've raised now, so you may wish to pass over me. And
Go ahead. Use your best judgment.
Okie doke. In a way, Hillel, though he's responding very kindly, he's also sending a message to the would-be convert by saying, what is hateful to you, don't do to others. And you can read that as he's doing two things. He's distilling that essence, as you said, but he's also saying, hey, buddy, you know, how would you like if someone came to you and said, plain, you know, your whole life's philosophy on one foot? So I think there's two different levels at which you can read Hillel's response, and they're both good because we should be kind to others, but we shouldn't indulge others' bad behavior. And he used a very non-humiliating, non-judgmental way to, at the same time, send a message. You know, because the essence of Judaism is treating others well. That applies to you too, if you would be a Jew. So that was my thought.
I like it. His answer is very what the Israelis would call harif. It's a spicy answer, right? Because he not only answers the question and fulfills the stipulation, he sorts of also gets a jab back at him too. It says this was a rude thing to be asking in the first place. I like. But
he does it without humiliating him, which is a very Jewish value.
Right. Exactly.
You know, we can sometimes rebuke, quote unquote, you know, but we should do it in such a way that we're not humiliating the person.
Good. Carolina, go ahead. Than's for being patient.
Oh, sure.
It seems. Sorry.
Carolina had a question. She had her hand raised.
Right.
Actually, I was going to pile on to what Rachel was saying, or is it Raquel? However.
Rachel.
Either. Yeah.
Okay. So I was, you know, when you asked what is this, I was back there when, you know, you said, what are they teaching? And so I agree completely with what she said. It was the teaching is multi-layered and it's demonstrating, like she just said, don't do this, right? That there's so much contrast here. And if you don't read it carefully, you can just kind of gloss over it. So, so I just wanted to echo what you were saying as well. So that's all I wanted to add.
And I think what I heard in what you said there, Carolina, too, is also that, like, Hillel is responding and fulfilling the condition, but also the way he turns it back is also acknowledging that this is a little bit Like, you ought really not to be asking this.
Well,
right?
it's the convert's first lesson.
Right. Right.
And
then,
yeah, so.
Right.
You know.
And so he's gentle about it, but it also sort of seems to say, like, this is a little bit impudent, or, you know, somehow.
Yeah, it's arrogance for sure. And not to pick on the other rabbi, but the other rabbi's not necessarily living Torah with their.
So Hillel and Shammai are set up as kind of foils for one another.
Yeah.
Well, Hillel's always the role model, and Shammai is always the.
Right. Yeah, the fall guy.
The fall guy, right.
What do they call that? They have the straight man in comedy or something.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Good cop, bad cop.
There you go.
Amy, thanks for raising your hand. What would you like to say? Where'd you go?
And if we're taking the story and the timeline of the story literally, to build on the, you know, rebuking the convert for maybe coming at it a little bit rudely, he does it after he converts him. He says, all right, now you're part of the tribe, you're part of the covenant, and now framing the go learning it and learning your lesson from it as a Jewish value, because now you're Jewish and there's the expectation that you live by that.
Good. Yeah, I like it. Darlene, please.
So I have a little different take, kind of going back to like your example on like, why didn't either the rabbis start with like, well, this is what it means to observe Shabbat.
Sure.
To me, when it's brought about, that's what's hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. It's not just about being Jewish, but it's about interacting in the world. Like the most important thing is, you know, it's important to do mitzvah, but you can't just be a Jew in isolation. You're a Jew in the world, and you're treating the whole world with kindness, not just your fellow Jews.
Right. Good. And I agree with you, and we'll double back a little bit later to exactly how I agree with you. I like what Daniel said in the chat here, that he's chutzpahdik, which, excuse my French, which is actually Yiddish. Yes, it's chutzpahdik is exactly the right word for what this Gentile is doing. Jill said, I think for non-Jews who are close to Jewish people, the whole of Judaism can be a little daunting. Absolutely. I think, you know, especially, like, I think we're supposed to, well, I don't know what we're supposed to feel, but I think it's easy to feel a certain amount of sympathy for this would-be convert. It's hard to ask questions about what you don't understand at all. And I think someone must have noted, this is, you know, maybe not that unreasonable to sort of ask about what's the big deal, what is the big picture here, and try to get some kind of answer before diving in deeper. Okay, are we ready to go on? Any more questions?
Yeah.
Come inside. Oh, Richard, or go ahead, please.
So on the one hand, it seems to be a story that at least involves a convert, if not about converts in general.
Yeah.
But I'm aware of the fact that this is written in the Talmud, and while maybe a convert at some point would be studying this, this is addressed in a sense to Jews.
Yeah, good.
People who would be actually reading this story and trying to sense out of it as
I think we can take that for granted. Yes.
Yeah. So I think this is actually kind of a challenge to all of us as Jews, that on the one hand, it does give something, a concise statement that's the maybe foundational principle of Judaism, but at the same time, it's saying this isn't all of it. There's a lot more. And for someone who's coming to Judaism from outside, obviously it's going to look like a lot and a lot to learn. For us who are already Jews, this is an obligation to study and understand and figure out how is it that we can be in relationship with other people in the world. And it's not simple, it's complicated.
Good. Richard, yeah. I'm going to use you as your comment, as I often do, as the pivot point into the next part I want to say, because that sets me up very nicely. Richard's not a plant, but he set me up very nicely, because part of Hillel's answer, like Hillel's answer is crucial. Like, he doesn't just say, here's the bottom line, right? There's more to it. So before we get there, I want to finish what I was saying about this sort of question of it, what is the essence of Torah? What is that essence? I'm curious if folks have ever confronted such a question themselves, especially the sort of personal framing of what do I have to do to feel that I'm Jewish enough for me, that I'm pious, that I'm doing this right. We don't need to share, that kind of personal, reflection here, because I think we can pretty much assume that kind of question, no matter who you are or what stage you're on the journey, I mean, almost all the more so for a rabbi who, one would think ought to already know, how much is enough. It's a question that provokes doubt, right? Anxiety. How do I know if I'm really doing Judaism right? This is a deep question and a difficult one. So remember, this is a fictional story and it's made up to teach us a lesson. There probably wasn't ever actually a Gentile who came and asked this. In fact, and actually this is why Richard's comments are such a great pivot, is because this was written not only for other Jews to read, this was written by Jews. So in other words, a Gentile didn't ask that question, a Jew asked that question. There's a Jew asking who wrote this story, what is this all about? How do I know if I'm doing enough, right? So nonetheless, there's an important move made here by putting that question into the mouth of a Gentile, because I think, it's basically projecting the cause of that kind of doubt, that kind of uncertainty onto an outsider, which I think makes it easier to deal with. If the story had been framed in terms of Hillel and Shammai just talking to each other, and one of them asked the other, what's the essence of Torah? That's much more provocative and, sort of agitating than it is to have the story, to have that same question asked, and to have us start that same process of trying to figure out what is the essence of Torah, but to have that sort of come from the outside, and for have it to be the sort of innocent first question of a potential convert. As Mariah says, in the chat, exactly, asking to explain Judaism in a simple way, like that's pretty understandable. To want to get that first and not explain all the do's and don'ts absolutely would be overwhelming, right? So in a way, and if we sort of go yet another level deeper, this isn't actually a story about conversion at all. It's a story by Jews for Jews who are wrestling with our own psyche, about our self-doubt, about the whole project of living and learning Judaism and whether we're good enough at it, whether we're doing it right. So why employ the image standing on one foot? Of all the different, linguistic, all the different phrases that could have been chosen to indicate brevity, some sort of short amount of time, could have had him say, teach me the whole Torah while I hold my breath, right? Or teach me the whole Torah while I count to 20 or something like that. Instead, it says, while I stand al regel achatz, on one leg, and that's why I highlighted there in the English translation that the word for a leg is regel. There's actually scholars think a little bit of a word play here. So the word regel in Hebrew sounds like the Latin word regula, which means in Latin, I'm told, I'm not a Latin scholar, a basic principle or a rule. So there's a word play here. When the Gentile asks, teach me the whole Torah while I stand on one regel, we can understand that his proposition a little differently. He's saying, teach me the whole Torah in one regula, in one basic principle. Essentially asking, like, is there a basic principle that underlies this enormous, multifaceted, edifice that is Judaism? Hillel formulates his regula, his rule. And actually, Shammai also uses a regula, because a regula in Latin is also a ruler or a measuring stick. So there's in some ways a multiple way wordplay here. Shammai responds with a regula, and so does Hillel. They're just different meanings of that Latin word. Okay. It's hard to do for a long time. It makes it sound like the speaker's impatient. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So I want to move into a different direction towards we got about 22 minutes left here, towards the title of the shiur, about the whole Torah in one tweet. and the sort of subtitle about what this all means in sort of an age of abbreviation. So please speak up if this sounds familiar to you. But I've heard this story told in a lot of different contexts, and frequently it's cut off at the end. Frequently, for example, I hear it told as, Hillel, Hillel said to him, that which is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. That is the entire Torah. Stop. Right? If you've heard it that way, like, you can give me a nod or anything like that. Frequently, that the last couple lines sort of get left off. And a lot of retellings sort of focus on this question of identifying the essence of Judaism and omitting the last line. What do you think? Why might that be a problem? Try reading the story without that last line. And does it change the story? Why might it be a problem? What do you think?
Well, it would imply that there isn't a lot more to learn to add on to that when there in fact is.
Good. Yeah, I mean, well put. Leah, go ahead.
It sounds like it would be being dismissive of the rest of the Torah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. It would, framed that way, Hillel's basically providing the shortcut and saying that's it, eliminating that demand for further engagement, right? And actually, it undermines the whole story. It undermines Hillel's whole point. It turns the story on its head. It's saying there is a bottom line, and that's all you need to know. That's the whole Torah. There's no need for anything further, which is, as we establish, is actually kind of not what this is going for. The storyteller, as in the framing that we see in the Talmud, wants us to understand there aren't any real shortcuts, right? There's no way to reduce the depth of the traditional one idea. This is maybe an entry point, as some folks have noted, but there's not really a way to avoid serious study and dedication, because the rest of the Torah, all that commentary, needs to be internalized too, right? Amy says, I heard it frequently cut off at the rest is commentary. Okay, good. So that's where I'm going next. And stopping early leave a very simple moral impression, describes the Torah entirely. Yeah, that's well put, Daniel. That's exactly what I'm getting at. So another abbreviation of this story is ending it after the rest is commentary. And in fact, I went on Twitter this morning and did a quote search for the rest is commentary. I put that term in quotes just to see what would come up, to see if I could come up with a recent example of someone doing exactly that, using this phrase, saying the rest is commentary, and then cutting off that last line, go and learn it. And sure enough, I found this tweet from yesterday morning. I blurred the identity of the tweeter to protect the innocent here. But this person says, religion is simple. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. All the rest is commentary. Stop. Clearly, and I can tell you too, this is not a person I follow. I actually don't know who this person is or what their deal is or anything else about them. I just found it as an example of someone doing exactly the phenomenon that I was trying to describe. The rest is commentary. Stop. But without that last line, go and learn it, the meaning of the story changes again. It means everything else, all that rest, is less than. It's unimportant, right?
Okay.
Everything that matters in the Torah is that golden rule. The rest is commentary. That's it. You don't need to know anything else important. Ellen, you got your hand raised. Please go ahead.
I found myself. When I was thinking about that part of it too, I think that we start with just a little bit, but really we're always learning, and it's kind of a spiral up of learning. More and more and more we learn, and I think that it doesn't matter. We all have to start somewhere, and I think that's more of this. And I was talking to my mother earlier today, she's 88. She goes, how come I didn't know about all these rituals about Shavuot and all of these, she just went on and on about all the things that I went through, all this stuff. I went, it was before there were bat mitzvahs and all. And she said, not once did I ever learn about these little rituals that people do. And I just think, well, there's so much more to Judaism, and it's not just about the written word, it's about all these other things, and it's so complex, and that we keep learning. And I think about every week when we do Torah study, and every year I write notes in the margins, and every year when we come back to that section, I see it builds on each other. Good. Even though I wrote it 3 years ago, I see, oh, there's another bit here. So I just feel it's like it's a saying of 2 Jews, 3 opinions. There's so much to learn and discuss. It's not just a stagnant one line or one leg.
I think Beth in the chat puts it really nicely that the go and learn it is the how-to. In a lot of ways, it's the how do you actually go about putting that into practice, which, yeah, as we know, is super complicated, right? Well done, Lisa. You got your hand raised. What would you like to share?
Well, I was I think there are several ways to read it. So the it as the last word. One is the rest, go and learn the rest, and the other one is the original statement. The golden rule itself, implying that it's simply put, but it's not easy, and you can spend the rest of your life learning how to do that.
Good. I think so. So the translation is obscuring a little bit here. The Hebrew just says, or the actually Aramaic says, "Zil Gemor," literally go learn. And there's not, we're left to figure out what the subject is. It's sort of implied that it is the Perusha, it is the commentary on the Torah, but it doesn't say explicitly like it does in English, where we need that subject of or I guess it's the direct object. Direct object, thank you. We need that, there needs to be something in which you are going to learn. So yeah, that's open for interpretation. Okay. So this idea, though, that all the rest is commentary and it's unimportant, this person on Twitter is not the only one I've heard this from. I've heard it from what you might call secularists, folks who are kind of dismissive of religion. Frequently, their idea of all religions, which is really kind of probably from a Christian normative perspective, but folks who want to dismiss religion as something that can be that can't really be meaningful outside of any sort of simplistic moral guidance. They want to reduce it to something. I hear it from very well-meaning folks who want to bridge interfaith gaps. People who want to basically find common ground and try to say something like we're all really the same. It's all about loving one another and doing unto others, right? Yes, but for us Jews, there's commentary and we need to go and learn it. So that's for us not the end of the story either. But for the storyteller in the Talmud, all of those parts of Rabbi Hillel's statement are connected. Like, yes, there's an essential principle, and the commentary is of crucial significance. It's the how-to, right? And therefore, you have to learn it. It's Perush. It's the whole rabbinic project. Like it's what the rabbis understand themselves as doing, is basically unpacking all of Torah in a way that it can be lived, right? He'll say most of the Torah's commentary, and that's it. Yeah, and Torah in the most expansive sense, not just the 5 books of Moses, but all of the Talmud and everything, is, I think the rabbis would say, kind of an expansion of those basic principles into a livable lifestyle, a comprehensive way of life. So Dr. Rubenstein, who, like I said, is in many ways the inspiration for the shiur, and I totally recommend his book, The Land of Truth. He is a professor of Talmud and Rabbinic Studies at NYU. So Dr. Rubenstein in his book bemoans all sorts of modern pathologies that he claims are responsible for this problem that he sees as basically minimizing the importance of comprehensive study in favor of one overarching idea. And in fact, that's what a lot of these abbreviations of Hillel's instructions in fact do. The story, which is ironically about not abbreviating, about not taking the essential principle as enough, but going deeper in a study. People abbreviate them and change the meaning. They're doing exactly the thing the story warns against. But Dr. Rubenstein basically points to all these sort of modern problems that he sees as responsible for this idea that we want simple rules and that we're not interested in doing comprehensive study anymore. Among them, he lists shortened attention spans due to smartphone use, like websites and newspapers publishing abstracts of articles instead of whole articles, publishers advising authors to write shorter books, university professors being pressured to reduce the number of readings they assign for courses, cliff notes for great works of literature, and most of all, and the reason I named this shiur this, Twitter. He does not like Twitter and the idea that you have to reduce everything to 140 characters, which is actually not even true anymore. A lot of people get 280 character limits. It's much different, much different. And the reason this inspired me is because I think there's some objective truth to those. But I think in a lot of cases, he betrays his own lack of perspective. For example, he's a professor complaining about how professors get pressured to assign less work. But anyway, I think it also betrays a little bit of a misunderstanding about how the world works now. I mean, you just can't study everything. You can't study all of everything all the time and still have time for anything else that's important. In fact, I think de-emphasizing comprehensive study in favor of more quickly digestible, overarching ideas is in some ways essential. It's how we're able to function in a complex world and still specialize in whatever area we're at, because that's the way our society and the economy is structured. And where it really becomes a problem is when we sort of make a category error. We assume that our knowledge of the rule, of the sort of simple principle, is enough. It puts us in the same category as people who've done the comprehensive study, right? Like it's enough to make crucial decisions or lead government agencies or write New York Times opinion columns or whatever it is, right? Lori, you have your hand raised. Oh, name of the book you were asking in the chat. Is that what you were going to ask? It's called The Land of Truth. I'll hold it up again here. It's called The Land of Truth by Dr. Jeffrey Rubenstein. I can, towards the end, I can send out a link if folks like. Yeah, Megan says, I'm an Intro to Judaism student, and even after learning 2 hours a week, impression at the end is, this is the tip of the iceberg. Now go and dig deeper. I have good news and bad news, Megan, which is that after 6 years of rabbinical school, I have the exact same impression that this is the tip of the iceberg. And I had teachers who joked that rabbinical school needs to be a 20-year program. And I think they're absolutely right. There's just way more than you're ever going to learn. And that's okay. I mean, that's okay. You get to keep learning. But I think that's part of what we're meant to recognize from this story. Okay. Consequently, and we got to move towards wrapping up here. So my purpose tonight is not actually just to guilt trip you all into studying more Torah, although wouldn't hurt exactly. Rather, I'd like to offer you what I consider to be actually a better attempt than Rabbi Hillel makes at deriving the essence of Torah, or something like Judaism's fundamental principle. And I'm going to argue this, and I'll tell you why. Okay, I'm going to go to my next slide. So if we can't necessarily, like if it's impossible to learn all of the Torah, in a comprehensive way, maybe we can do a better job of summarizing. And here's my argument for that. Check out source number 2 there, Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18, is what's probably a familiar line to many of you. In the larger context, you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen. That's not what we're worried about. The part we're interested in is ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You should love your fellow or your neighbor or something like that as yourself. You may have also heard of another rabbi who came along about 100 years after Rabbi Hillel and took a stab at this trying to distill Torah into one pithy quote like that. And it's here in source number 3. And actually this particular little bit appears in at least 3 different places. I picked the one from the Jerusalem Talmud. It's a different Talmud. I'm not going to go there today. If you have questions later about what the Jerusalem Talmud is, I'm happy to answer. But this little story appears in multiple places. And here, Rabbi Akiva, and actually there are songs about this. Amar Rabbi Akiva, ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, zeh klal gadol b'Torah. So Rabbi Akiva says, love your fellow, love your neighbor as yourself. This is the great principle of Torah. And here he's saying basically, I think, what Rabbi Hillel says, except as somebody noted at the beginning, in a positive formulation. It's a positive thing you're supposed to do. You're supposed to love. It's not about not doing what you don't like. And I think it's very likely that Hillel, 100 years before, was alluding to exactly the same verse that Akiva just goes ahead and quotes verbatim, right? As I think, was it Daniel said earlier? Somebody said that you think the positive formulation came first and the negative one after. I think you're probably right. So the problem is, though, I think that there are a couple of flaws in this answer. And here I'm guided by my teacher, Rabbi Art Green at Hebrew College, who notes a couple of flaws in taking the line, love your fellow as yourself, as the great principle, the essence of Torah. First, how can I be commanded to love somebody? There are, after all, some pretty unlovable human beings in the world who do some really awful, unlovable things. So if I take this line, love your fellow as yourself, to be the essence of Torah, am I really transgressing the very essence of Torah, the whole Torah itself, if I fail to love those people? We're closing in 58 seconds. Oh my gosh. Okay. Second problem, neighbor is subject to interpretation. Is it only Jews, or only the kind of Jews I agree with? Unclear. This is why I like Ben Azai better. Ben Azai says, these are the generations of Adam, is an even greater principle of Torah for two reasons. One, you actually have to go and look up the rest of the verse to see what it means. It's there at the bottom. This is the book of the record of the human line. When God created human beings, God made them in the image of God. In other words, it's about essential dignity that is afforded by being in the image of God. Ultimately, there are no shortcuts to attaining wisdom. That's what the end of my shiur was going to be about. I was going to show you some quotes from three sages, the same ones we already heard from, and how it's never too late to start, and you do need to do the comprehensive study. But thank you all so much for learning with me tonight. This has been great.